And welcome back. The Bronx Cannabis Hub aims to ensure the social equity provisions of New York's cannabis law are realized by providing information and opportunities as well as support to the communities most harmed by the cannabis prohibition. Joining me now to share more details, we've got the co-founder of the Bronx Community Foundation, Desmon Lewis. And Desmond, glad to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you and great to talk to you. And I want to talk about this because when we talk about cannabis, we know that, marijuana, arrests, right? These are the words that are synonymous. And then what's even more synonymous are communities of color. Walk me through, share with me a little bit about, the disparities that's actually been had on families, particularly when it comes to this area.
And thank you again for covering this important topic. So when you look at the history of marijuana, particularly in communities disproportionately impacted in the Bronx, we would argue is the community that was probably the most disproportionately impacted in the state. Numbers-wise, if you look at arrests across New York City and look at the districts, the top 10 districts on arrests, 4 of the top 10 districts for arrests in the Bronx for marijuana are actually in the Bronx. And so there's no better place to be doing the work that we're doing in our community. And then when you look at those individuals who've been directly impacted, formerly incarcerated, those who've been convicted of a marijuana offense, they've had a tremendous amount of impact personally and professionally over many, many years. Inability to get jobs, inability to get loans, inability to support their family, inability just to have opportunity, right, afforded to many other people in the Bronx. And so, with the Bronx Cannabis Hub launching and the new MRTA regulation sort of expunging a lot of the cannabis records that have really been disproportionately impacted in our community, this is a huge opportunity for Bronxites and disproportionate communities across the city to really take advantage of a situation where they themselves have been personally impacted. And so we are very excited to be supporting, some of these activities and getting Bronxites really their just deserve in the cannabis space.
Yeah, share with me a little bit. We're talking about the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, but share with us, how do you think this will really have a benefit locally with our communities?
So New York State's doing something very different than most states in the country, and we're pretty proud of it. Is that firstly, they're prioritizing justice-impacted individuals. So the first 150 to 175 licenses are going to be for those individuals who have been impacted by a marijuana offense. There are some other regulation requirements, such as having a profitable business, and also making sure that you do have that marijuana conviction itself. And so Bronxites, particularly given the amount of arrests that have happened in our community, really are in a prime position to take advantage of this opportunity to be an entrepreneur in this industry, to be able to launch the conditional adult use retail dispensary, or the CARD license, is the first license that's going to be issued in New York State. And because of the fact of the sheer number of arrests in the Bronx, we believe that the Bronx is really the place that should be put to the forefront to take advantage of some of these opportunities. And so we're excited about this particular license, but we're also excited about all the other license types that are going to come out and be driven by OCM over the next couple of years.
So I know one of the things that you have going on at the Hub is educational services.
Yes.
What kind of educational services do you have for the public when it comes to this?
So we're designing sort of a multi-pronged educational series. And I think the most important part is that we're going to be working with grassroots organizations who've been on the ground doing this work for many, many years, organizations like Mothers on the Move, One Freedom, Take Root, and many others, to really design this educational programming. And it's going to be multifaceted. It's going to be in entrepreneurship, or let's say workforce development stroke entrepreneurship. So how do we get jobs into the Bronx? How do we train people on getting jobs in the industry? There's going to be a health aspect. We know that marijuana is just a plant, contrary to what our public sector colleagues would like to classify it. And so there's some medicinal benefits, but there's also, people need to be aware fundamentally of what the potential negative aspects of it are, right? And so we're going to be doing some education around health, and then we're also going to be doing some advocacy work, right? Education on how people can get involved in the community to make sure that some of the wrongs that were created in the past around this industry are not, do not happen again. That our communities that are disproportionately impacted are prioritized, there's a lot of funding coming from the state. And so we want to educate our community on what those opportunities are to bring generational wealth building into the Bronx.
And before we go, Desmond, I want to throw in about community-based organizations because you're also working with them too. They're bringing things and you're bringing things to them. There's a good collaboration there. Can you give us a little idea of some of the organizations that you're working with and the things that are happening?
Sure. So I think, because the Bronx is such a dynamic and innovative and grassroots place, there are a lot of organizations that are jumping in to help. So I named some of them like Mothers on the Move, Take Root. There's a whole organization, coalition forming around bringing educational series to the Bronx. We're working with also schools like Lehman and some of the CUNY schools who are building curriculum around cannabis education. We're working with cultivators in the Bronx. Recently, the OCM has passed regulation that says you can do home grow. And so we're working with cultivators who are doing that in the Bronx to educate people on what that means. And so it has to always, one of the core foundation missions of the Community Foundation is to work with grassroots organizations who've been in the community alongside us for many years. And so that's how we're going to start this educational series. And that's really how we're going to fundamentally sustain this work in the Bronx.
Well, Desmond, I got to leave it there. I want to thank you for joining us and sharing. And certainly we got more to talk about when it comes to this, but glad to have you here talking about the Cannabis Hub and then also the work that's going on. Desmon Lewis, who's the co-founder of the Bronx Community Foundation. Thank you so much for being with us, brother.
Thank you for always bringing important topics to this audience.
All righty. Well, we got to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more right here on Open. And we're back continuing our conversation on the Bronx Cannabis Hub. We've got the Policy Counsel of the Criminal Defense Practice of the Bronx Defenders, Eli Northrup, joining us. And thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Well, I want to continue the conversation, talking a little bit about where myself and Desmond were wrapping up, talking about how organizations are really coming together to really, become more aware. And I think one of the things that we talk about when it comes to awareness is that there is a disparity, and the disparity between those who are using and those who are arrested. And I just want to get your take on that because I know that's something that you're trying to tackle as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Office of Cannabis Management has really emphasized individuals that have been arrested, and that's why we're trying to help those individuals through this process to apply for these licenses. But as much information as there is, and there is some information out there about these licenses, there's a lot of confusion as well. People see that there's storefronts, people see people selling, and none of those are actually licensed storefronts. And so people feel like they're behind the eight ball in terms of getting in on the industry. And we're trying to make sure that people know, look, this is the first round of applications, and you still have ability to participate in this economy.
So we hear a lot about the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, and we want to talk about what exactly is that. For somebody who doesn't know, give us a little insight.
Yeah, well, that's the bill that legalized adult use cannabis in New York. It went into effect on March 31st of last year. If you're over the age of 21, you can possess up to 3 ounces of cannabis inside or outside of your home. Eventually, you'll be able to possess up to 5 pounds inside of your home. Not only did that bill legalize adult use and set up a regulated market, it also looked to repair past harm done from decades of racist policing in cannabis. So it provided for automatic expungement of past convictions. 40% of the tax revenue from cannabis sales will go back into communities that were disproportionately impacted by cannabis policing, and social equity in licensing. And that's where the Bronx Cannabis Hub is really working right now to ensure that those social equity provisions actually play out as intended, and that people who were targeted for policing, people that suffered from cannabis prohibition, have a chance to actually make money and build generational wealth.
Well, late August, there was the application period that opened up. We're just about a month in. It's a 30-day application period. Can you tell us where we are and what you've been seeing as far as the application process?
Absolutely. I mean, so when we're airing right now, the application period has already closed. It closed on Monday, the 26th. We at the Bronx Cannabis Hub had a cohort of 40 people that we helped through the process. All of these individuals had to both have a cannabis-related conviction and 2 years of profitable business experience. So it was a pretty narrow range of people that were actually eligible for this first round of licenses. Now, obviously, there's going to be many more opportunities for licensing in the future, but this first round had those very specific criteria. We screened over 450 people. And so most people who were interested were not eligible for this round. But we've told them, social equity is a priority in every single round. So in the future, next year when the other application periods open, there'll be more opportunities for participation.
What are we doing to make sure about social equity? We hear so many people that are really concerned about this particular issue, saying that, listen, when it comes to those who had to do the time for doing it, they looked at like communities of color. When it looks like those who have the opportunity for now owning it and owning it legally, now they look white. Question needs to be answered. How's social equity?
Right. I mean, no state has really successfully done social equity in cannabis. You're right. If you look at other states, if you look at states like California, it's big corporations that come in after communities of color has suffered for years from prohibition. You've got big corporations coming in and making the money. And New York wanted to do it differently. The MRTA, the bill, attempts to do that. It's actually a really good bill for social equity. It ensures that there's not something called vertical integration. So in other states, big companies can own everything from seed to sale, which makes it a lot more profitable for them. In New York, companies can't do that. You can only really hold one type of license. So you could be a cultivator, you could be a processor, you could do delivery, you could have a dispensary, but you can't hold all of these things. That's an effort to prevent big business from coming in and taking over. And then on top of that, the Office of Cannabis Management, the agency that's in charge of carrying out these rules, is saying that they want to emphasize social equity at every single turn. So this is the first effort at social equity, right? This first round of licenses, you have to have a cannabis conviction to even be eligible. But in the future rounds of licenses, they are saying that social equity will be prioritized. And in fact, the bill requires that 50% of licenses go to social equity applicants in every single kind of license.
It's going to be pretty interesting to find out, and we'll continue to find out. 30 days just ended. Of course, we'll find out how things pan out. But if somebody wants to get more information, what do they do?
Yes, visit the BronxCannabisHub.org. We'll be here to help individuals, especially justice-impacted people, especially Bronxites, through all the rounds of licenses. We'll have educational events, information, pro bono legal services. It's the BronxCannabisHub.org, or you can find us at Instagram, Bronx Cannabis Hub.
All right. Eli, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for being with us here on the show and giving us the information that we need. Again, if you want to find out more information, we encourage you to go ahead and find out. You can do that, again, BronxCannabisHub.org, and then also follow them on Instagram at Bronx Cannabis Hub.